Hello, welcome to our presentation. My name is Rohit Ahuja.
Hello, my name is Alejandro Espinosa.
Hi, I'm Kira McLaughlin.
Hi, I'm Emma Mueller.
Hi, I'm Michaela Santos.
Hi, I'm Sophie Shiner. Good afternoon. Today we'll be presenting our report titled Consumer Perceptions Regarding the Truth Initiative's Effectiveness in Decreasing E-Cigarette Usage. To begin, the CDC reports that between the years 2017 and 2018, vaping rose by nearly 80% among high school students. Originally, e-cigarettes were created to help adults quit smoking cigarettes. However, these e-cigs have many sweet flavors that appeal to many teens and young adults, which created an unexpected rise in nicotine use amongst Americans aged 13 to 24. To combat this, the Truth Initiative was created. This nonprofit runs various anti-smoking advertisements specifically targeted to this younger age group with the hope that it will deter young people from smoking. So, with this in mind, we wanted to research if these campaigns were actually effective. Our research question is, how have truth advertising campaigns affected consumer perceptions on e-cigarettes? Our research objective is to analyze how the Truth Ad campaign influences consumer perceptions of e-cigarette usage and whether it changes that perception or not. By showing a Truth Initiative commercial, we want to discover if these ad campaigns are effective in helping teens and young adults consider quitting smoking their e-cigarettes. This is a very relevant issue as Big Tobacco has unethically been targeting their marketing efforts to the younger generation by luring them in with their sweet flavors. This has resulted in rising e-cigarette usage in ages as early as 13. By researching how consumers respond to the Truth Initiative's ads, we can verify if the Truth Initiative is marketing their efforts well in the fight to end e-cigarette usage.
Before we dove into conducting our own analysis, we found it beneficial to look at research that is already out there and that'll supplement and give us a better understanding on our topic. Here are some topics that we researched that we consider secondary data. I'm going to pass it along to Rohit, who will tell you about some of them.
Generational marketing is huge in the terms of nicotine and tobacco, as they've been prevalent in American history from the inception of this great country. It was actually encouraged by doctors until 1964 with the line, as you may recall, 1 cigarette a day keeps the doctor away, which is what most people believed until 1964 when the Surgeon General conducted some research with some pressure from outside groups and figured out that it's not good for health. It's bad for your lungs, it's bad for pregnancy, birth defects, bad for your heart in general. So after the Surgeon General's warning, the tobacco and nicotine companies had to get creative of how they wanted to market their product, which is why they started stealing M&M's marketing strategy of product placement in movies. They started placing cigarettes in a lot of movies, and analysis of 250 films, 81% of them actually showed cigarette at least once, with 44% showing cigarettes multiple times to kind of get it out in front of the audience as subtly, just to make sure they can get hooked later. Another thing which they did, which can maybe tribute to the flavored e-cigarettes, was the candy cigarettes. They look just like a cigarette, as you can see in the slide on the picture right next to it. They actually smoke just like a cigarette, but no fire. It's just a bubble gum. This wanted to get the kids, in the hands, the motions, just to feel like they were cool. Another thing that they also do is eye-level marketing. This is where they product place their stuff in stores, convenience stores, wherever they sell their product at an eye level for kids, not at 5'10", 6 foot for adults. They're at like a 5 foot, 4.5 foot for younger kids to see a jewel and for them to get my idea in their minds to beg their parents to get something. This is also why there's been a transition to the electronic delivery system as opposed to the conventional cigarette. Next slide, please. There are a lot of recent policies and laws that have been enacted to counteract this. However, it was highly unregulated during the early times. As recently as 2016, a couple of states on the West Coast, California, Oregon, Washington, to name a few, pushed their age limit from 18 to 21 for people who wanted to buy any nicotine or tobacco products. There were also many advocacy groups who pushed the FDA to require labels and warnings on packages, so when people bought cigarettes or any e-cigarette device, they would know the dangers that came with consuming of that product. The FDA also conducts mandatory random inspections on manufacturing and distribution plants to make sure that everything is in accordance to FDA law. Next, Michaela will talk about our research question.
Since our research question deals with a specific company, we found it important to gain knowledge and insight on the Truth Initiative, their history, their motives, etc. The Truth Initiative started in 1999, and their goal was having a society that was free of tobacco, both in children and adults. How they did this was they exposed the negative truths about big tobacco companies. They also spearheaded engagement programs for youth and provided young people with tools and tips to quit smoking. They also created the Truth Initiative Schroeder Institute, which investigates trends in the tobacco use industry, and they did this to protect the communities that were being harmed by this. They publish their findings and give their findings to legislative policymakers who can make an actual change on the legislative scale. Now, the Truth Campaign are the advertisements that are put on by the Truth Initiative, and these advertisements are meant for 13 to 24-year-olds, which explains the advertisements are in places like, and platforms like MTV, and more recently on apps such as TikTok.
The industry life cycle has been relatively positive before the 1980s, 1990s, as cigarettes were a huge part of life. However, after the 1990s and 2000s, the cigarette cycle has been on a downswing as that market has started to tank. However, as that market has started to tank, the e-cigarette market has started to explode. Just some numbers to give you conceptualize of what we're talking about. The e-cigarette industry in 2014 was worth $6.3 billion annually, and that has jumped over 300% to $19.8 billion as recently as 2019. This e-cigarette has also resulted in 50,000 new jobs in America, which are mostly selling jobs because manufacturing of these products happen in China and overseas. It has been relatively growing from 2014 to 2019 until recently in August, September of the fall of 2019, we had illnesses due to e-cigarettes, which has made some states and counties enact laws to ban flavored cigarettes, which has started to hit the market as we've seen now. Next, Kayla's going to talk about the consumer perceptions and the trends of these markets.
Thank you, Rohit. Now we're going to talk about consumer perceptions and trends, more specifically minors and parents. The trend line of e-cig and vaping history has had highs and lows in the past 5 years, but overall we've seen an increase in usage, especially in the youth. According to the CDC, within the next 2 years, vaping and e-cigarette usage could jump by nearly 78%. What's even more terrifying is that within those 2 years, that number between middle schoolers could jump by 48%. Middle schoolers. Parents across the nation are outraged, and rightfully so. They believe that their children's new habits are changing them and that they don't even recognize the kids before them, these kids that are now juuling and vaping. That's why many of them are pushing for legislative change and action. Now I'm going to talk about consumer perceptions and trends among adult users. There has been an apparent rise between adult users, and with that, a whole new culture has been created. With this are more people who are more passionate about vaping, and this wasn't really apparent in the last couple decades, but it is now. Furthermore, we discovered that in a survey conducted that many adult users believe that raising the legal age of vaping would be more effective in preventing illegal usage amongst minors over banning flavored Juuls and pods and juices.
Now I want to talk just briefly about the survey methodology on how we collected our evidence and our results. So our research group created a survey through Qualtrics to obtain customer perceptions regarding e-cigarette usage. In order to target our audience of young adults, we have chosen to use a convenience sample regarding kids from San Diego State University, University of California, Irvine, Cal State Fullerton, Coronado High School, Sunny Hills High School, Clark Magnet High School, and La Cañada Middle School. We have chosen to pursue a convenience sample due to the coronavirus and the time constraints of our research.
Our target audience includes 13 to 24-year-olds within California. We have created a variety of questions regarding the demographics of our subjects, the smoking behavior of our subjects, and the pre-advertisement and post-advertisement video perceptions our subjects have about Truth Initiative's anti-e-cigarette message. We took the data we received through our Qualtrics survey and analyzed it through the SPSS program. Emma and Kira will now discuss these results.
Before we ran any tests on our sample, we decided to get some basic demographics through the use of descriptive analytics. The average respondent age in our sample was 19.2 years old, which is relatively young. And out of the 78 respondents we had 35 males, 42 females, and with one person who did not respond. It was also interesting to see that out of the 78 respondents, 40 of them identified as white/Caucasian and 25 identified as Asian or Asian Indian. But most importantly, what we saw in this descriptive analysis was 25 out of 78 respondents claimed to have smoked a cigarette at least once, with the first try averaging at an age of about 16.4 years old. Now, on the other hand, 43 people out of these 78 smoked an e-cigarette at least once with an average age of 16.7 years old. What this shows is that clearly the e-cigarettes have had way more usage from our respondents than cigarettes. And then the next slide, please. We conducted a regression analysis test through SPSS to predict the relationships between numerous dependent variables and predictors. We tested the relationship regarding the exposure of the Truth Campaign in relation to the respondent's age. The test proved that there was a significant difference and a negative correlation between the dependent variable in the past month, how many times have you seen an advertisement from the Truth Campaign, and the predictor age. This correlation shows us that the younger the audience, the more often they are seeing the Truth Campaign advertisements. Next slide.
Thank you, Emma. Through SPSS, we also conducted several crosstab and chi-square analyses to determine if there are any significant associations between our variables. These are the significant associations we found. If you'll click, please. Thank you. And then the next page. So the first significant association we found is between people's highest level of education and their attitude towards cigarette use. As you can see from the table, the higher the education level a person has, the more likely they are to have a negative attitude towards cigarette usage. For example, 60% of respondents who have a very negative attitude toward cigarette use have completed grad school, and 64.7% of respondents who have a negative attitude towards cigarette use have also completed grad school. With more education, people develop more negative attitudes towards cigarettes. This is relevant because we know that younger people have positive attitudes since they're not as educated. Therefore, the Truth Campaign should be targeting younger adults. Next slide, please. Secondly, on the top left-hand corner, we discovered a significant relationship between if someone has ever smoked a cigarette and if someone has ever smoked an e-cigarette. As you can see here, those who have smoked an e-cigarette have smoked a cigarette before too. It's a fairly strong association, as 53.5% of people who have smoked an e-cigarette have also smoked a cigarette before, and 91.2% of people who have not smoked an e-cigarette also have not smoked a cigarette. This is relevant because we need to know which of our respondents actually smoke and have been able to quit due to the Truth Campaign advertisements. Next, on the bottom right, we can see that the pattern is that most people whose current attitude towards e-cigarettes has changed have also smoked a cigarette before, and the opposite is true as well. 54.5% of people whose current attitude towards e-cigs has changed have smoked a cigarette before, and 76.9% of people whose attitude towards e-cigs has not changed also have not smoked a cigarette before. In other words, people who smoke cigarettes could be changing their attitude towards e-cigs due to the Truth Campaign's ads. Next slide, please. Here we can see the association between people's attitudes towards e-cigarette use and if they've ever smoked an e-cigarette. We found that only 32.6% of people who have smoked an e-cigarette have a slightly negative attitude towards e-cig usage, while 44.1% of people who have not smoked an e-cig have a very negative attitude towards e-cigarette use. In addition, mostly only those who have smoked an e-cig have a neutral to positive attitude towards e-cig use. Therefore, we can conclude that to have an effective ad, the Truth campaign should create a negative image of e-cigs to change people's attitudes. Next slide, please. Next, we found that those whose reaction was neutral to the Real Cost campaign, advertisement 2, also had a neutral reaction to the Truth campaign, which was advertisement 1. Also, those who had a slightly negative reaction to advertisement 2 had a slightly positive reaction to advertisement 1. From the percentages within the table, we found the association to be fairly strong. For example, 44.4% of people who had a slightly negative reaction to ad 2 had a slightly positive reaction to ad 1. These results could indicate that people had a negative reaction to advertisement 2 because it presented cigarettes in a negative light, whereas these people had a positive reaction to advertisement 1 because they felt the message was demonstrated in a positive or fun way. Next slide, please. Lastly, we found a significant association between people's attitudes towards e-cigarette use and their e-cigarette usage. As shown, 66.7% of people who are daily users have a slightly positive attitude towards e-cigarette use. 60% of people who are occasional or former daily users have a slightly negative attitude towards e-cigarette use, and 36.8% of people who chose other for e-cigarette use have a negative attitude towards e-cigarette use. People who chose other for e-cigarette usage stated that they either only smoked an e-cigarette once or rarely ever smoked an e-cig, so they can be considered non-users. Therefore, since those who use e-cig more frequently have a positive attitude towards e-cigarette use, the Truth campaign's ads need to be presenting e-cigs as a negative image to change their attitudes and usage. Now, Emma will continue the data analysis. Next slide.
So moving on to the independent t-test, we were able to see the differences between males and females to see how their gender plays a role in certain behaviors regarding e-cigarette usage. So using SPSS, we ran gender, male and female, with at what age did you first smoke a cigarette? There was a mean age of 15.61 for males and 18 for females, demonstrating that men began smoking e-cigarettes earlier than women. This difference between males and females also proved to be statistically significant. The meaning of this finding is that males at a much younger age have been users, start to become users. Now, on the next slide, we will discuss the results of paired sample t-test. So with the paired sample t-test, that played a really big role in our analysis. As part of our survey, we asked respondents questions regarding their general attitude towards cigarettes and e-cigarettes, followed by 2 advertisements from Truth Campaign and The Real Cost. Then we measured their reactions on a 7-point scale, 1 being very negative and 7 being very positive. The first test we ran, we had the variable, what is your general attitude towards cigarettes? And the second variable was, what is your general reaction to this advertisement, which referred to a cigarette-specific ad. Now, the second test we ran, same questions, but what is your general opinion towards e-cigarette use, and what is your general reaction to this ad, which was an e-cigarette ad. Both tests showed that there is a significant difference in attitudes before and after seeing the ads, which is really important for how the company decides to make their ads. And I will turn it over to Alejandro.
Some of the conclusions we get from our research are the Truth Campaign targets younger audiences, as our regression analyses revealed that younger audiences were exposed to the campaign more often than other respondents. People that received higher education were more likely to have a negative attitude towards smoking. Furthermore, people's attitude towards smoking depended on their usage. We saw more effective behavior from Ad 2, the Real Cost campaign, ad compared to Ad 1, the Truth Campaign ad. So what we recommend is that the Truth Campaign create content more similar to the Real Cost advertisement. This includes adding scare tactics, changing the tone into a more serious one, and showcasing the negative effects more. Respondents stated that the advertisement's message was hard to conclude, therefore making the message more clear and apparent will be more effective. We recommend creating content that will be geared more towards the male population in order to create a bigger impact earlier to decrease their future use. We would recommend putting more money into platforms where the millennials and older Gen Z spend time. We recommend to do this with the advertisement that fits under our first suggestion. Next slide, please. For the limitations, there were some limitations throughout our research that we could have affected our findings. First, there is an apparent bias in our respondents. Our respondents were people in our circles of influence who we believe will respond responsibly and accurately. Many respondents were similar in their demographics, and there was not a large amount of diversity. Secondly, we discovered 2 errors in our survey design that affected the test we wanted to conduct. The questions, how many e-cigarette pods do you smoke weekly, and how many cigarettes do you smoke weekly, were not displayed to most respondents. Therefore, only 1 respondent answered. This created a non-response bias in our survey. The topic of our survey may still be considered taboo in our society right now. With this, respondents may want to give desirable answers because of feelings of embarrassment or shame. Another limitation we observe is that having our respondents taking our survey in their own time and in their own environment, while the duration it took to take the survey was recorded, the lack of monitoring may have affected the quality of the responses. Lastly, there may have been a bias in the advertisements in our survey. While our survey did not have any apparent leading questions showing the real cost advertisements, fears may have unintentionally created a base comparison for the Truth Campaign advertisement. In retrospect, randomizing the order in which the advertisements appear on the survey will be a great way to minimize the bias.
Everyone,
Thank you.
E-presentation. We hope you enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.